My name is Nora, and at 35 years old, I never imagined my birthday party would become the most legendary corporate takedown in Chicago history. 200 guests gathered at the Riverside Country Club that night, thinking they were celebrating my birthday and my husband Daniel's $50 million merger. I spent the entire dinner clutching a small USB drive in my purse waiting. By the time the chocolate souffle arrived, everything had changed forever. Before I share what happened that night, let me know where you're watching from. And please subscribe if you love stories about women who refuse to be victims. The nightmare began 3 weeks before my birthday. Daniel came home from his office, loosened his Italian silk tie, and announced he was combining my 35th birthday celebration with his company's merger celebration. Data Vault Solutions, the tech company he built from our garage 12 years ago, had just closed the deal of a lifetime. I met Daniel at Northwestern University when I was 22. He was the brilliant computer science grad student who couldn't match his socks, and I was the marketing major who helped him practice his first investor pitch. When he proposed 2 years later, he promised we would build an empire together. For 12 years, I believed him. Data Vault Solutions started in our garage with $5,000 from our wedding fund and my entire savings. While Daniel coded through nights, I handled everything else: marketing strategies, client presentations, investor meetings, and later raising our twins Emma and Ethan, who just turned 10. When the company grew too demanding, Daniel asked me to leave my marketing director position at a Fortune 500 company. He said the company needed one of us fully committed, and with his technical expertise, it had to be him in the office. I agreed because I loved him. I agreed because I believed in us. I agreed because I thought marriage meant sacrifice and compromise. The first sign something was wrong came 6 months ago. Daniel started having late meetings with Marcus, his chief financial officer. They would lock themselves in Daniel's home office, speaking in whispers that stopped whenever I approached. Phone calls ended abruptly when I entered rooms. His laptop, once casually left open, now required a password. 3 weeks before my party, while Daniel was at his racquetball game, I decided to check his email. The password was still our anniversary date, a detail that would later strike me as particularly cruel. What I found made my blood freeze. Email after email between Daniel and Marcus about something called Project Prometheus, asset transfers, offshore structuring, timeline for completion, my birthday. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my phone. There were spreadsheets showing money movements, $30 million flowing to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Legal documents preparing to transfer intellectual property to a new LLC called Quantum Innovations, where my name appeared nowhere. I called Lauren, my best friend since college, who worked as a forensic accountant. She arrived within an hour, and we spent the night piecing together Daniel's plan. Every document pointed to the same conclusion. My husband was planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing. After 12 years of sacrifice, after giving up my career, after being the foundation that allowed him to build his empire, he was going to discard me like outdated software. Lauren found more than financial betrayal. There were restaurant receipts for places I had never been, jewelry purchases. I had never received hotel charges during his supposed business trips to Seattle. The credit card statements painted a picture I had been too trusting to see. My successful, ambitious husband was not just planning to leave me. He was already living a double life. The next morning, Daniel kissed me goodbye like any other day. He mentioned the party planning was going well and that he had a special toast prepared. Something about new beginnings and exciting announcements. I smiled and told him I couldn't wait to hear it. The moment his Tesla pulled out of our driveway, I began my own planning. If Daniel wanted to make an announcement at my birthday party, he would get more than he bargained for. 2 weeks before the party, I hired a private investigator through one of Lauren's connections. Thomas Morrison was a former FBI agent who specialized in corporate fraud and matrimonial investigations. Within 48 hours, he had uncovered what Daniel had hidden for 8 months. Her name was Cassandra, 26 years old, fresh MBA from Wharton, working in Data Vault's strategy division. Thomas provided photographs that felt like physical blows. Daniel and Cassandra at a restaurant in Lincoln Park, her hand on his across the table. the two of them entering a luxury apartment in the Gold Coast that Daniel had leased 4 months ago. Cassandra wearing a sapphire bracelet that Daniel claimed had been stolen from our home during a repair visit. The evidence was overwhelming. Receipts for a $12,000 Cartier necklace purchased on what Daniel told me was a client golf trip. First-class tickets to Cabo during his supposed conference in Denver. Text messages Thomas somehow obtained showing Daniel promising Cassandra that after the divorce, they would start fresh in California, where DataVault was opening its new headquarters. But the most devastating discovery came when I searched Daniel's golf bag in our garage. Hidden beneath his rain gear were divorce papers already signed by him dated 3 weeks before my birthday party. The papers cited irreconcilable differences and claimed I had contributed nothing substantial to our marital assets. There was a financial disclosure form that somehow omitted $30 million in recent transactions. I sat on our garage floor holding those papers, feeling something inside me transform. The pain crystallized into determination. The betrayal hardened into strategy. If Daniel thought he could erase me from the life we built together, he had gravely miscalculated who he married. Lauren helped me trace the money movements. The offshore accounts were sophisticated, but not invisible. Every transfer left digital footprints that Daniel in his arrogance hadn't properly concealed. We found shell companies layered upon shell companies, all leading back to accounts controlled solely by Daniel and Marcus. More disturbing were the patent transfers. Every innovation, every piece of code that built DataVault was being quietly moved to the new LLC. The algorithms I had helped him refine during late-night sessions, the business processes I had designed, the client relationships I had cultivated, all being stolen from under me. I discovered Daniel had been removing my name from joint investments for 6 months. Our property holdings, our stock portfolios, even our children's college funds had been restructured. Each change was small enough to not trigger alerts, but together painted a picture of systematic financial abuse. The breaking point came when I found recordings on our home security system. Daniel had forgotten that the system I insisted on installing recorded audio in his office. I heard him telling Marcus exactly how the announcement would work. Daniel's voice was cold, calculating. The birthday toast would be the perfect cover. 200 witnesses to see me receive the news publicly, ensuring I couldn't make a scene. He actually laughed when he said I would be too shocked and too concerned about appearances to react badly. He called me predictable, manageable, someone who would accept a quiet settlement to avoid embarrassment. Marcus asked about the children. Daniel's response made me physically sick. They were young enough to adjust, he said. Weekend visits would be sufficient. He had already interviewed nannies for his new life with Cassandra, who would be a better role model for success than a housewife. That night I created my own project. I called it Project Truth. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence was meticulously organized and backed up in multiple locations. I opened a safety deposit box at a bank Daniel didn't know about. I consulted with 3 different attorneys to understand my options. But legal revenge wasn't enough. Daniel wasn't just betraying me personally. He was committing corporate fraud, tax evasion, and stealing from his own company's shareholders. He thought he was untouchable, protected by his success and connections. He was about to learn that the woman he underestimated had been watching, learning, and preparing for 12 years. 1 week before my party, I assembled my team in secret. Lauren's living room became our war room, with whiteboards covered in timelines and evidence charts. My first recruit was Bradley Chen, a former colleague who had become an investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal. Bradley had been following DataVault's merger for months and suspected something irregular about the numbers. When I showed Bradley the evidence of financial manipulation, his eyes lit up like a reporter who had just found Watergate. The story was bigger than personal betrayal. It was corporate corruption at the highest level, involving insider trading that could affect thousands of shareholders. My second call was to Roger Williams, Daniel's first business partner, whom Daniel had forced out of the company 5 years ago. Roger had claimed Daniel stole his code, but without proof he had been painted as a bitter former partner. When I contacted him, Roger nearly cried with relief. He still had the original source code timestamps, proving he had written the algorithm that became Data Vault's core product. Daniel had built a $50 million company on stolen foundations. Through Bradley's network, I connected with 3 former Data Vault employees who had signed NDAs after suspicious terminations. Maria, a former CFO, who had questioned irregular transactions. James, a developer who had refused to falsify user data for investors. Catherine, a sales director who had discovered Daniel was bribing government officials for contracts. Each had been silenced with threats and modest settlements. But NDAs become void when covering criminal activity, a fact Daniel had apparently never considered. They agreed to speak on record if I could guarantee protection from retaliation. Lauren's investigation uncovered the full scope of Daniel's tax evasion. $15 million in unreported income hidden through a complex web of international transfers. She documented every violation with the precision of someone who had spent 10 years putting white-collar criminals in prison. The breakthrough came when I guessed Daniel's laptop password. He had changed it from our anniversary date, but Daniel was predictable. Our son Ethan's birthday worked on the 3rd try. His computer was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. I found messages between Daniel and Marcus planning to frame me for financial irregularities if I fought the divorce. They had created false documents showing I had been siphoning money from the company. The setup was elaborate, but flawed with timestamps that didn't match, and digital signatures that could be proven fake. More shocking were Daniel's communications with Cassandra. He had promised her an executive position once I was removed. He detailed how he would portray me as an unstable wife who couldn't handle his success. There were drafts of press releases painting him as the victim of a vindictive spouse. I screenshot everything recorded, everything documented, everything. Each piece of evidence was verified by Lauren, reviewed by Bradley, and stored in multiple secure locations. We were building a case that would destroy Daniel's empire in minutes, not years of litigation. The most powerful ally came unexpectedly. Margaret Harrison, Data Vault's longest-serving board member, had always been kind to me at company events. When I reached out suggesting coffee, she agreed immediately. Margaret listened to my evidence for 2 hours without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back and said something I will never forget. She told me that she had suspected Daniel's unethical behavior for months but lacked proof. The board had concerns about financial discrepancies, but Daniel always had explanations. With my evidence, she could call an emergency board meeting that would terminate Daniel immediately for cause protecting the company and shareholders from his fraud. We planned the timing perfectly. Margaret would schedule a video board meeting during my birthday party, ostensibly to approve a minor acquisition. The real agenda would be Daniel's termination based on the evidence I would provide live. I also contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Through Bradley's sources, I was connected with Agent Sarah Coleman, who specialized in corporate fraud. After reviewing my evidence, she assured me that criminal charges were not just possible but probable. She asked me to file a formal complaint 48 hours before the party to allow time for warrants. My final preparation was personal. I moved half of our joint savings to an account only I controlled legally allowed under state law for marital assets. I secured copies of all important documents, passports, birth certificates, social security cards. I prepared a bag with clothes and essentials for the children in case we needed to leave quickly. I also made an appointment with Chicago's top divorce attorney, Richard Brennan, who had handled 3 billionaire divorces. After reviewing my evidence, he waived his usual retainer and took my case immediately. He said it was the most clear-cut case of financial fraud in a divorce he had seen in 30 years of practice. The night before the party, I stood in my closet choosing my outfit. Daniel had bought me a red designer dress for the occasion, probably thinking it would be the last gift he would ever need to give me. I hung it back up and chose instead a black cocktail dress I had bought myself. Black felt appropriate for a funeral, and tomorrow I would be burying Daniel's empire. The morning of my 35th birthday, I woke up beside my husband for what I knew would be the last time. Daniel was already awake, scrolling through his phone with a smile that made my skin crawl. He kissed my forehead, and wished me happy birthday with such fake sincerity that I almost laughed. Downstairs, Emma and Ethan had made me birthday cards at school. Emma's card said, "Mommy, you're the strongest person I know." If only she knew how strong I would need to be in the next 12 hours. I hugged them extra long before Daniel's mother arrived to take them to their sleepover, an arrangement I had insisted on to protect them from what was coming. The country club looked magnificent. 200 place settings with gold chargers and crystal stemware. Centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. Daniel had spared no expense, probably thinking this grandiose gesture would somehow absolve his guilt. By 5 o'clock, guests began arriving. Data Vault's entire executive team, major investors, political figures, including the mayor who Daniel had cultivated for years. My family arrived in a cluster of nervous energy. My parents, still married after 40 years, beaming with pride at their successful son-in-law. My sister Jessica, 8 months pregnant, waddling in with her husband Mark. Daniel's parents arrived fashionably late. His mother Catherine giving me the coldest embrace I had ever received. She knew. The way she avoided my eyes, the way she immediately went to Daniel's side, she absolutely knew what was planned. His father Richard at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. During cocktail hour, I moved through the crowd like an actress playing her final role. I laughed at jokes, accepted birthday wishes, complimented dresses, and admired photos of grandchildren. All while 3 USB drives burned in my purse like loaded weapons. Lauren arrived with her husband, giving me a subtle nod. Everything was in place. Bradley had positioned himself in the corner with a perfect view of the head table, his phone ready to livestream. Roger Williams made his entrance exactly at 6:30, causing Daniel to nearly drop his martini. I had told Daniel that Roger was a last-minute addition, a gesture of reconciliation for the company's history. What made my blood boil was watching Cassandra work the room. She wore a silver dress that hugged her athletic figure, her wrist adorned with a sapphire bracelet that had supposedly been stolen from my jewelry box. She introduced herself to my friends as Data Vault's new head of strategy, speaking about the company's future with an ownership that made everything clear. Marcus stayed close to Daniel, occasionally checking his phone and nodding. They had their own timeline for the evening, not knowing that mine would supersede theirs entirely. I heard Marcus tell another executive that tonight would be remembered as a turning point for Data Vault. He had no idea how right he was. The dining room doors opened at 7, and guests found their assigned seats. The head table was a who's who of Daniel's success story. Board members, major investors, his parents, and of course Cassandra, somehow seated just 2 places from Daniel's left. I sat at his right, the dutiful wife in her designated place for one last performance. The first course arrived, a delicate butternut squash soup that I barely tasted. Daniel was animated, working the table with stories of the early days, painting himself as the visionary who built an empire from nothing. No mention of my contributions, my sacrifices, or even my existence beyond being his wife. Between the second and third courses, I excused myself to the restroom. In the privacy of a stall, I sent 3 messages. One to Margaret confirming the board was assembled. One to Bradley confirming he was ready to stream. One to Agent Coleman confirming law enforcement was standing by. Everything was synchronized to the minute. Returning to the table, I noticed Daniel reviewing note cards hidden beside his plate. His toast, his grand moment, his public destruction of our marriage disguised as a celebration. He caught me looking and winked, probably thinking I was touched by his preparation. If only he knew I had memorized every word he would say before he said it. The third course, pan-seared salmon, arrived as the sun set through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The room glowed golden, 200 people enjoying gourmet food and premium wine, oblivious to the bomb about to detonate in their midst. I counted down minutes like a condemned prisoner, except I wasn't the one facing execution. Daniel stood up as the plates were cleared. He tapped his champagne flute with a silver spoon, the chiming sound cutting through conversations. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the man of the hour. My heart rate spiked, but my hands remained steady. 12 years of marriage, 2 children, 1 shared life, and it all came down to this moment. Daniel raised his champagne flute higher, his smile radiating the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. The room held its collective breath as he began the toast that would end everything. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very special occasion. Tonight we celebrate not just my beautiful wife Nora's birthday, but also Data Vault's historic $50 million merger with Prometheus Technologies. Polite applause rippled through the room. I smiled and nodded, playing my part perfectly while my finger found the USB drive in my purse. 12 years ago, I started this company with nothing but ambition and code. Today, Data Vault stands as proof that with vision, determination, and the right decisions, anything is possible. Daniel's eyes swept the room, carefully avoiding mine. Success in business, like in life, requires evolution. It requires recognizing when chapters end and new ones must begin. The shift in his tone was subtle but unmistakable. Several guests exchanged glances, sensing the strange direction of the toast. I want to thank my executive team, especially Marcus, for their unwavering loyalty, my investors for believing in the vision, my parents for their guidance, and everyone who understood that building an empire sometimes requires difficult choices. He still hadn't thanked me. My mother's smile began to falter, confusion creeping across her face. Which brings me to an important announcement. They say the best time for new beginnings is when you're at your peak. Tonight, as we celebrate tremendous success, I must share that Nora and I will be dissolving our marriage. Gasps erupted across the room. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. My father stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. Jessica's hands flew to her mouth, while cameras throughout the room turned our way. Some guests already recording on their phones. Daniel continued, his voice steady and rehearsed. Sometimes we outgrow people who were meant for only one chapter of our story. Nora has been a wonderful mother to our children and supportive wife during Data Vault's early days. But as the company enters its next phase of global expansion, I need a partner who can match the ambition and scope of what we're building. The cruelty of it. The calculated humiliation, the sheer arrogance made my skin burn. But I remained seated, my expression calm, waiting for him to finish digging his own grave. I want to assure everyone that Nora will be well taken care of. A generous monthly allowance will ensure she maintains her lifestyle. The children will have everything they need. This is not an ending filled with anger, but a conscious uncoupling that allows everyone to pursue their authentic path. He raised his glass toward me. The gesture so patronizing that Lauren later told me she nearly threw her plate at him. So please join me in wishing Nora well in her next chapter and celebrating Data Vault's bright future with new leadership, new vision, and new partnerships that will take us to unprecedented heights. The room was frozen, 200 people unsure whether to drink, applaud, or flee. The silence stretched for 5 seconds before I pushed back my chair and stood. Thank you, Daniel, for that enlightening toast. My voice carried clear and strong through the stunned silence. Since we're making announcements about new beginnings and authentic paths, I have a few of my own to share. Daniel's smile flickered. This wasn't in his script. I pulled out the USB drive, holding it high enough for everyone to see. But first, I think everyone deserves to know the full truth about Data Vault's success and Daniel's vision for the future. Walking to the AV system, I inserted the drive with steady hands. Daniel started to move toward me, but stopped when the first video began playing on the screen behind the head table. His own voice filled the room from a recording made in his office. The birthday toast will be perfect. 200 witnesses, public humiliation, she won't fight back. She's too concerned with appearances. We transfer the remaining assets Monday morning, and by Friday, the divorce papers are filed with her having no claim to anything substantial. Marcus's voice responded, "What about her name on the original patents?" "Already handled. Backdated documentation shows she had no involvement. My lawyers assured me it's airtight." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Daniel's face drained of color as the second recording began, this one from his phone conversation with Cassandra. "Once Nora's out of the picture, you'll have the executive position we discussed. The board will approve it immediately. Just keep being patient, baby. After tonight, we won't have to hide anymore. Cassandra's reply was clear. I'm wearing the sapphire bracelet you gave me tonight. She still thinks it was stolen during the house repairs, doesn't she? Cameras were now recording everything, guests openly filming the unfolding drama. But I wasn't done. The screen changed to financial documents, offshore accounts, tax evasion evidence, each slide annotated with Lauren's forensic analysis. For those wondering about Data Vault's impressive profits, I announced, you might be interested to know that $15 million in revenue was hidden from the IRS through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Board members were pulling out phones, several standing up in alarm. Margaret Harrison's face appeared on screen via video conference, addressing the room from an emergency board meeting happening simultaneously. Based on the evidence presented and verified by independent forensic accountants, the board has voted unanimously to terminate Daniel Morrison as CEO of Data Vault Solutions, effective immediately. Criminal charges are being filed with the SEC and FBI for securities fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. The doors burst open. Agent Coleman entered with 6 FBI agents, their badges visible, their purpose clear. Daniel Morrison, you're under arrest for federal tax evasion, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Daniel tried to run, actually tried to push through the crowd toward the exit, but there was nowhere to go. As they cuffed him, he screamed at me, "You don't know what you've done. This is my company, my creation." That's when Roger Williams stood up. Actually, Daniel, let's talk about whose creation it really is. Roger connected his laptop to the AV system displaying code timestamps. This is the original source code for Data Vault's core algorithm, written by me in 2011, 2 years before Daniel claimed to have invented it. I have filing receipts, development logs, everything proving Daniel stole my work to build his empire. Former employees began standing throughout the room. Maria, James, Catherine, each announcing their willingness to testify about Daniel's corporate crimes. The NDAs they signed were void, covering up criminal activity, and they were finally free to speak. Cassandra tried to slip away in the chaos, but found herself face to face with her own parents who had been invited as family friends. Her mother's slap echoed across the room, followed by her father's booming voice denouncing her as no daughter of theirs. Marcus attempted damage control standing on a chair to address the room, but security guards hired by the board were already beside him. Margaret's voice came through the speakers again. Marcus Chen, you're also terminated for cause, and your assets have been frozen pending investigation. Through it all, I stood at the center of the storm calm in the chaos I had orchestrated. Bradley's live stream had already reached 100,000 viewers, the video going viral in real time. My phone buzzed with messages from women around the world applauding what they were witnessing. Daniel was led past me toward the exit agents on either side. He stopped, his face twisted with rage, and hissed, "You've destroyed everything. The children will have nothing. You'll have nothing." I leaned close enough for only him to hear. "Actually, Daniel, I have everything. You see that generous monthly allowance you mentioned? Your lawyers never noticed that the prenuptial agreement you insisted on has an infidelity and crime clause. Your affairs void it completely, and your criminal convictions mean I get full custody, all marital assets, and controlling interest in Data Vault." His face went white as the implications hit him. Lauren had discovered the clause months ago buried in subsection 12 of a document Daniel had signed without reading, so confident in his own invincibility. "But the real poetry," I continued, "is that while you were moving assets to hide them from me, you accidentally transferred them into jointly owned shells that legally I now control entirely. Your greed and arrogance handed me everything." The agents pulled him away as he screamed threats about custody, about revenge, about destroying me. I pulled out my phone and played one final recording, Daniel's voice saying the children were burdens to his success, that weekend visits would be more than enough, that Cassandra would be a better role model than their housewife mother. Agent Coleman paused to listen, then looked at Daniel with disgust. "Add conspiracy to commit parental kidnapping to the charges. We have evidence you were planning to take the children to Switzerland without consent." As Daniel was dragged out, still screaming, the room slowly turned back to me. 200 faces waited to see what would happen next. I picked up the microphone, my voice steady and clear. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. This wasn't how I planned to celebrate my 35th birthday, but sometimes life demands we stand up for ourselves in unexpected ways. For those who came to celebrate, dessert is still being served. For those who need to leave, I understand completely. And for anyone who wants to discuss Data Vault's future under new ethical leadership, I'll be taking meetings starting Monday. Half the room erupted in spontaneous applause. Several women were crying, some from shock, others from what looked like recognition of their own stories. Investors approached me immediately, expressing support and confidence in my leadership. The mayor himself shook my hand, whispering that it was the most impressive thing he had witnessed in 40 years of politics. The immediate aftermath was controlled chaos that I navigated with 12 years of practice managing Daniel's messes, only this time I was cleaning up for myself. Daniel's parents fled the scene before dessert arrived, his mother's designer heels clicking frantically across the marble floor as she refused to look back. His father at least had the dignity to mouth, "I'm sorry," before following her out. They would later attempt to claim grandparent rights to the children, a battle they would lose spectacularly when Daniel's recorded comments about the kids being burdens became public record. Marcus tried one last desperate play, cornering me near the dessert table with threats about contractual obligations and legal consequences. Margaret Harrison personally intervened, informing him that security footage showed him attempting to physically intimidate me, which would be added to his growing list of charges. He was escorted out by security, his company laptop and phone confiscated on the spot. My family surrounded me like a protective wall. My mother, recovered from her initial shock, became a fierce defender, telling anyone who would listen that she always knew Daniel wasn't good enough for me. My father, quiet and steady, simply held my hand and said he was proud of me. Jessica, despite being 8 months pregnant, stationed herself as my personal bodyguard, redirecting anyone who seemed hostile. The surprising support came from unexpected corners. Victoria Blackwell, the wife of Data Vault's biggest investor, pulled me aside to share her own story of corporate betrayal 20 years ago. She handed me a business card for a therapist who specialized in financial abuse recovery. 3 other executive wives approached me throughout the evening with similar stories, creating an impromptu support group over chocolate soufflé. By the time the party ended at midnight, the live stream had reached 2 million views. Bradley's Wall Street Journal article was already live online, with the print edition planning a front-page business section feature. My phone had received over 300 messages from women sharing their own stories of financial betrayal, thanking me for showing them it was possible to fight back. The children were my immediate concern. I drove to Daniel's mother's house at 1 a.m, prepared for a fight. Instead, I found Catherine Morrison had already packed their bags and had them waiting in the foyer. She couldn't meet my eyes as she said, "I knew what he was planning. I told myself it wasn't my business. I was wrong." It was the closest to an apology I would ever get from her. Emma and Ethan were asleep in the car within minutes, unaware that their world had fundamentally changed. I had already arranged for child psychologists to help them process everything, determined to protect them from the trauma while ensuring they understood they were loved and safe. The next morning brought a media storm. News vans lined our suburban street by 7 a.m. Daniel's arrest photo was on every major news outlet, the story of the birthday party revenge gone global. I gave one exclusive interview to Bradley, ensuring the narrative focused on corporate accountability rather than personal drama. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Daniel's assets were frozen within 48 hours. His attempt to access the offshore accounts failed when he discovered I had already alerted the Cayman authorities with Lauren's help. $30 million was recovered and returned to Data Vault's legitimate accounts. Cassandra became the media's secondary villain, her image splashed across tabloids as the stereotypical home-wrecking mistress. She was fired from Data Vault within hours of the party, and faced her own legal troubles when investigators discovered she had been feeding Daniel inside information about competitor companies she had previously worked for. Her parents' public disowning of her went viral, becoming a cautionary tale about ambition without ethics. The FBI investigation uncovered more than even I had known. Daniel had been selling company secrets to Chinese competitors, bribing federal officials for contracts, and manipulating stock prices through coordinated trades with Marcus. What started as divorce proceedings became a federal case that would eventually result in a 15-year prison sentence. Roger Williams became my unexpected ally and eventual business partner. His gracious handling of the stolen code situation, focusing on restoration rather than revenge, earned him respect from the board and investors. Together, we restructured DataVault with transparency and ethical practices at its core. The company initially stumbled stock prices, dropping 20% in the first week after the scandal. But something remarkable happened. Our clients, particularly women-led businesses, rallied around the new leadership. New investors drawn to the ethical restructuring and transparent practices began pouring in. Within 3 months, DataVault's value had increased by 40% above pre-scandal levels. I received death threats from some of Daniel's supporters, requiring security for several months. But I also received partnership offers, speaking engagements, and a book deal that I turned down. This wasn't about fame or revenge porn. It was about justice and survival. The divorce was finalized in record time. Daniel's criminal convictions triggered every protective clause in our agreements. I received full custody of the children, all marital assets, including our homes, and controlling interest in DataVault. Daniel was left with nothing but legal bills and a prison sentence. 6 months later, at DataVault's relaunch event, I stood before many of the same people who had witnessed my humiliation. The company had been restructured with employee profit-sharing ethical guidelines and a foundation supporting women in technology. Roger and I announced a new patent for encryption software that would revolutionize data security legitimately this time. Today, exactly 1 year after that birthday party, I'm sitting in what used to be Daniel's office, now mine, watching the sun set over Chicago's skyline. DataVault is valued at $80 million, having completed 3 ethical acquisitions and launched products that actually improve people's lives, rather than just generating profit. Emma and Ethan are thriving. The therapy helped them understand that their father's choices weren't their fault. Emma wrote an essay about strong women for her school project, citing me as her hero. Ethan asked if he could change his last name to my maiden name, Anderson. We made it official last month. Daniel serves his time in minimum security federal prison. He sends letters the children don't read and makes phone calls they don't answer. His parents relocated to Florida, sending birthday cards with checks that I donate to women's shelters in the children's names. Cassandra disappeared entirely. Though LinkedIn shows she's working as a freelance consultant, her reputation permanently destroyed by her choices. I started the Phoenix Foundation with my first year's CEO salary, providing legal and financial support to women facing economic abuse and divorce. We've helped 73 women so far, each one recovering assets hidden by fraudulent spouses. Lauren runs the forensic division, her expertise invaluable in uncovering financial manipulation. There's even new love in my life. William Barrett is a widowed mathematics professor at University of Chicago. Someone who values honesty above ambition, kindness above conquest. He makes my children laugh, respects my independence, and understands that trust is earned slowly after betrayal. We're taking it slow, building something real on foundations of truth rather than promises. But the most important change is within myself. I no longer apologize for taking up space, for having opinions, for demanding respect. The woman who sat silently while her husband planned her public humiliation is gone, replaced by someone who understands her own worth, isn't determined by anyone else's validation. The birthday party revelation taught me several crucial lessons. First, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Daniel showed me his true character in small ways for years, prioritizing success over family wealth, over loyalty, image, over authenticity. I chose to see what I wanted to see, rather than what was actually there. Second, financial independence isn't just about money, it's about freedom. Every woman should know exactly what assets exist in her marriage, where the money goes, and how to protect herself legally. Love shouldn't require blindness to practical realities. Third, the greatest revenge truly isn't destruction, but reconstruction. I didn't just tear down Daniel's empire built on lies. I rebuilt it on truth, creating something better from the ashes of his greed. Every success Data Vault achieves now proves that ethical business isn't just possible but profitable. Fourth, sisterhood is powerful. Lauren Margaret. The women who stood by me, the millions who watched and supported from afar, were all part of an invisible network that activates when one of us refuses to be victimized. We're not in competition, we're in collaboration against systems designed to diminish us. The deepest lesson is about my own strength. For 12 years, I believed my value came from supporting Daniel's dreams. I measured my worth in his achievements, my success in his satisfaction. The birthday party forced me to discover that my strength wasn't derivative of anyone else's. It was mine all along, waiting to be claimed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Daniel had simply asked for a divorce honestly. If he had acknowledged my contributions, split assets, fairly prioritized our children's well-being, we might have parted as friends, co-parents who respected each other despite growing apart. Instead, his greed and cruelty activated something primal in me, a survival instinct that transformed into triumph. The women who contact me through the Phoenix Foundation often ask how I stayed calm during that birthday toast, how I didn't break down or lash out. The truth is, I had already grieved. In the 3 weeks between discovering his betrayal and the party, I mourned my marriage, my trust, my old life completely. By the time Daniel stood to give his toast, I wasn't losing anything. I was taking everything back. There's a photo from the party that went viral, captured by a guest in the moment after the FBI arrived. I'm standing in my black dress, spine, straight face calm, while chaos erupts around me. Some people called it cold calculating, but I see a woman who finally understood her worth wasn't negotiable. Her dignity wasn't optional, and her revenge wasn't vengeful, but simply just. Every woman has a moment when she must choose between accepting humiliation or demanding justice. Mine happened to occur in front of 200 witnesses and millions of viewers. But the choice is the same, whether it happens in a courtroom, a bedroom, or a boardroom. We can accept the narrative others write for us, or we can grab the pen and write our own ending. My ending isn't finished yet. Data Vault continues to grow, my children continue to heal, and I continue to evolve into someone I'm proud to be. But I know this: any person who tries to diminish me again will discover what Daniel learned that night. The quiet ones aren't weak. We're calculating. The supportive ones aren't passive. We're observing. And when pushed too far, we don't just survive. We thrive spectacularly. The birthday toast meant to destroy me became the moment I was reborn. Daniel thought he was ending my story, but he was actually writing the first chapter of my real life. A life where I'm not the supporting character in someone else's success, but the protagonist of my own triumph. That's the ultimate lesson from my 35th birthday party. When someone tries to end you with a toast, you don't just survive until dessert. You rebuild the entire menu, own the restaurant, and serve them exactly what they deserve. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very prepared, you get to do it all before the souffle arrives. The truth is, every woman has this power within her. The power to document, to plan, to network, to refuse victimhood. We've been taught to be grateful for crumbs while others feast on what we helped create. But gratitude without justice is just another form of oppression. And justice, when it finally arrives, tastes sweeter than any birthday cake ever could. So to every woman watching this, reading this, living this, some form, remember, you are not crazy for sensing betrayal. You are not weak for having trusted. You are not vindictive for demanding justice. You are not broken for surviving. You are powerful beyond measure, and anyone who tries to convince you otherwise is afraid of what you might do when you realize it. My name is Nora Anderson, formerly Morrison, and at 36 years old, I can finally say with complete certainty the best birthday gift I ever gave myself was the truth served cold with a side of justice that not even Daniel's expensive lawyers could overturn. So I want to ask you all something. Have you ever had someone try to humiliate you publicly, only to have it backfire spectacularly? What's your story of turning the tables when someone underestimated you? Share your experiences in the comments below, because every story of triumph helps another woman find her strength. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of women who refuse to be silenced. Share this with any woman who needs to hear that she has more power than she knows. Together, we're changing the narrative one revelation at a time. Thank you for witnessing my journey, for your support, and for being part of a community that believes women's stories matter. Remember, your worth is not negotiable. Your voice is not optional, and your success is not dependent on anyone else's permission. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, and never let anyone write your ending for you.